Yeah, so I think in the history of anti-Semitism, there's been a lot of different reasons given. Like you said, the oldest one is probably deicide. We killed our God. We have the blood libels, which is these irrational fabrications of stories that Jews killed Christian babies to use their blood for matzah, which is insane because blood is prohibited to consume. There's the reason of scapegoat. The world needs a scapegoat when things are bad, like Hitler kind of seized upon that. And then the Jews are different. The Jews are so successful, like Elders of Zion, kind of anti-Semitism. To me, my perspective on this matter is that, first of all, I think probably in opposition to the conclusion, I didn't read the whole article, but that anti-Semitism is a unique phenomenon that only really applies to Jews. Why? Because while you may find isolated incidents of hatred towards any other group, I think the ubiquity and the intensity of hatred of Jews, irrational hatred of Jews, and the fact that it's been going on for so long, I think really warrants the question of why do people hate Jews? So yes, I think you find pockets of Muslim hate or pockets of Christian hate or pockets of, everyone hates, or a lot of societies kind of have our way or we're the best, and you see that by the World Cup, right, everyone with their flag and everyone with their we're the best. But I think the phenomenon of Jewish hatred, I think, is different because it spans centuries and it spans different cultures. And you find hatred of Jews when the Jews were on top of the world, and you find lots of hatred of Jews when the Jews were not doing very well in their countries, like in the 19th century or 18th century in Czechoslovakia, 17th century, with Khmelnytsky, whatever, when he massacred thousands of Jewish towns, killed hundreds of thousands, slaughtered them just for no reason. The Jews were living like peasants. They weren't on top of the world. Scapegoat theory, by its definition, is irrational. If you're looking for a scapegoat, you will only agree to the Jew as being the scapegoat if people already believe that they don't like Jews. You can't convince people. Hitler, think about Hitler, right? Jewish people are the most integrated into society than they've ever been in Nazi, or before in the 20s and 10s and 20s. The Jewish people were less than 1% of the population. Infinitesimally small amount of people. Nothing, there were 0.5%. Nothing. Yet somehow Hitler managed to convince the Germans that the Jews were the cause of all the misfortune that befell the Germans, which is nonsense. But he managed to convince them. I don't think if they didn't believe that already, he could have convinced them that. So as to the reasons for anti-Semitism, I don't think. I think it's a very, very broad subject. Obviously, my perspective, and I've shared this with you guys on several occasions, is that the reason why the non-Jews hate the Jews is a safety gap, a irrational safety measure put in place by the Almighty to ensure that the Jews never lose their distinct character as a nation.
You're saying that the Holocaust brought the Jews back together.
Listen, that's a very crude way to say what I'm trying to say, but I do believe that if we believe in God, and we believe in God not taking days off or years off, we have to ask the question of what was God thinking to allow the Holocaust. And it's not an easy question. It's not a question we can answer, sitting here and drinking coffee on Sunday morning. I think it's obviously a very sensitive question. And, there's a lot of emotional baggage that we all carry with us when discussing this question. But on very broad, crude terms, I think if you just look in history as to the path and trajectory of the Jewish people in Europe in the 19th and early 20th century, I think that perhaps we could argue that the Jewish people were about to reach a point of no return in their loss of national character and identity, and that was radically changed with the Holocaust. And obviously, it's the most traumatic thing that happened to us since the destruction of the temple, Second Temple, 2,000 years ago. But I think on very insensitive terms, we could agree that if you look at Jewish people today, and where they are today, and the fact that there's 6 million Jews in Israel, that would not have happened at the Holocaust. Listen, there's no real answer that will satisfy anyone.
I know why the Jews made a horrible mistake.
Okay.
They caused anti-Semitism on their own.
How's that?
Because they believed in education.
They believe in education?
They believed in education and they were smart. The rest of them were klutzes out there. They wouldn't get an education and they envied the Jews. That's why.
Yeah, but remember, they envied the Jews. Remember, the Jewish people in the 18th and 19th centuries were the least educated they ever were. Least educated ever were.
Least educated.
Compared to, in comparison to the Gentiles, the Jewish people always had 100% literacy. Always. The only exception was in the shtetls in the 18th and 19th century. That was the only exception in history. Yet did that seem to temper anti-Semitism? Absolutely not. And the Jewish people were more similar to the Gentiles than ever before in the 19th century specifically.
Well, look at
did it help?
In 1939, when the ship to St. Louis came over, and Roosevelt's guy, what's his name, Cornell Hull, talked Roosevelt into. He said, "You'll never win the election if you let these 963 Jews in 1940." So obviously there was hatred. Plenty.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead.
Part of that, and I'm no fan of Roosevelt, but part of that is, remember we had Depression times coming in, and you couldn't have people in our own country were starving. So, to take in more people, and nobody took Hitler seriously at that
These
time.
were wealthy Germans. Wealthy.
No, I understand that, but it still was. There was a nativist view in the country at that time.
You can't claim that Fuhrer was an anti-Semite. I mean, he appointed Robert Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of
I think
Defense.
Obama's an anti-Semite. He had Summers and Axelrod.
Let's do it.
I don't think
Morgenthau was a
Obama's
Hoff
anti-Semitic
Jew. That's what he was.
So,
He's a Muslim. Court Jew. Hey, get back to the Jew.
It's interesting. My mother told me.
Rahm Emanuel left.
Anti-Semitism. And the example that I would think of is
Catholic ignorant
with respect to Israel.
and to actually to
Jews believe, I'm generalizing as a rabbi, but Jews have taken the position that any political view that is negative of Israel, their foreign policy, their diplomacy or something, is somehow anti-Semitic. And that cannot be correct. And so with respect to Israel, are the Jews too super sensitive in interpreting a lot of things as anti-Semitic?
See, I think that's a more specific question. Like I think that question is more easily answered than anti-Semitism at large. I think that like this. First of all, there's. Do I think that Israel should be above reproach? Absolutely not. And do I think that there can be legitimate, criticism levied at Israel? Absolutely yes. I think everyone would really agree to that. However, I think Israel is a prime example at how the Jews, and don't think it's anti-Zionism, that's nonsense, but the Jews are unfairly treated, and I'll explain. Yes, while Israel has its faults, no one's going to argue that Israel has its faults. However, compared to any one of its neighbors, it is the most moral, and the sterling character of Israel outshines any of its neighbors in their mistreatment of minorities. Where you have an Arab Supreme Court member, Arab people participating in the elections, full citizenship, full rights given to the Arabs. That doesn't. It's the only place that I know that Netanyahu likes to say this again and again. The only place in the Middle East where Arabs have democracy is in Israel. On one hand, their super sensitivity when it comes to not striking at civilians during war is another example. Their dedication to rights of say what you want. We'll talk about the homosexuals a little later on, but. Thanks, Bernie, for introducing that question. But that, it's a modern, it's Western, it's democratic, it's compared to its neighbors. While it has its faults, it's sterling. And then Israel, some guy makes some peasant makes a porch on his house in Jerusalem. Oh, the whole world's up in arms. When Assad slaughters 250,000 of his own people, 250,000, an enormous amount of people are dead. No one makes a big deal about it. Israel's criticized in the UN more than anyone else by far. If you take the rest of the world and all of the all the regimes of terrorists and megalomaniacs that run this globe, who's criticized? Israel. So yes, I think that warrants us to be very weary of any criticism towards Israel, because usually when criticism is levied at Israel, it's unfair, especially, and it's not proportional. So yes, is it perfect? No one would agree that it's perfect. I think we talked about that last week. From any perspective, it's not perfect, of course, but are they better than their neighbors? By a million miles. And who is criticized? The Jews, the Israel's criticized, and I don't think it's a surprise.
And there's a lot of thought out there as to whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.